All right, all right. Hello, hello once again. My name is Slizwack, and that's Rochel T. And we're here for that thing that we do every Thursday, that podcast thing. And today, the thing we want to talk about, and I know there's some people out this who have been affected by it. I've been affected by it. We all will know that guy that got fired for smoking on the job, positive urinalysis. So yeah, today we're going to talk about weed in the workplace. Um, it's a hot button topic that a lot of people, unfortunately, they think they have all the answers. So yeah, Rocha, let's jump into it. By the way, you're probably smoking on some orange cookies. I'm still smoking on this black diamond here, but I switched up pipes. So yeah.
Black dog.
So oh yeah, black dog. I don't know. But so yeah, let's talk about it.
I have a one word. Well, I guess it's two words. Is it one word? Two words. Common sense.
Okay. I 100 and wholeheartedly agree with that. Um, do I want my heart surgeon smoking a fatty before he freaking jumps in there? Probably not. But my mechanic, he can definitely smoke a couple fatties before he jumps in there. You know what I'm saying?
And see,
It's
what I mean by common sense is like businesses are not the same. And you just pointed that out. Two great examples. My mechanic working on my car might be a little bit high up versus my heart surgeon on the job who might be a little high up, which is already a problem. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, he's not smoking weed, you know what I'm saying?
So there can't be a one size fits all approach across industries. And I know that sounds wrong, because especially when you're looking at medication, but current standard is there are some medications that you can't take being on the job because of the side effects that you get from that medication. Correct. Do I think that marijuana is the same thing as pharmaceuticals? Absolutely not. But having effects or side effects from your medication is absolutely something that happens with both. And when you're talking about fast food versus heart surgery, when you're talking about mechanics versus, tech support, you have to look at those on a case-by-case basis, I think. And I don't think that it should be universal across all industries. I don't think that it should be. I think that, most business owners are capable of making the decision on whether somebody comes to work inebriated or under the influence and can't perform their job. And that's kind of my perspective. Yeah, that's kind of my perspective, is that with common sense and a common sense approach, I don't think that people should be penalized for I don't think that drug testing should be a prerequisite for having an employee. I think that what needs to happen is we need to shift away from this punishment-based philosophy. Well, you're good until you're not. I think that we should focus on performance, because companies should have more wiggle room than they do now when it comes to firing an employee for cause. And I mean, I guess to an extent, there are some protections in place like that, but the inequality that comes with drug testing is profound, because
I agree.
Very specifically, companies do not have the technology to be able to gauge when the last time the person smoked, if they're currently under the influence, if there is any effect going on from the last time that they smoked, because there are no guidelines for testing and there is no research done to be able to determine what your blood alcohol THC content means. They can get that information, they can get what you have, but there's no way for them to scientifically determine whether you are currently under the influence. So it's an automatic mark against you because they don't know. And it all with blood alcohol content, they can do that. It is between 0.2% and 0.4%, and they can gauge how many drinks you've had down to the hour based on your blood alcohol content, because the effort has been put into understanding that. And
Yeah.
people now can take substances illegally or legally that could put them under the influence, and they can walk into work right now. So it's crazy to me that drug testing is a prerequisite for you getting employment or not getting employment, being judged fairly or being judged unfairly, losing your way of living because they don't know whether you are or you aren't. And that's, hugely prejudice based, hugely prejudice based.
And I think we have to go with, I think before we start anything, I think we have to go with apples to apples. And what I mean is,
Mm.
I have, in the military I was in charge of the urinalysis program. I think I may have a little bit of knowledge how it works, and I can tell you factually, uh cocaine, heroin, alcohol are all toxic poisons to your body. Your body gets rid of them in 96 hours or less, except in the case of hair. But normally, in urine and blood, your body gets rid of those in 96 hours or less. Why? Because they're toxic poisons to your body. Your body wants to get rid of them. Your body makes minute, tiny amounts of different types of THC, and your body knows how to deal with it. If you smoke weed, probably a couple joints a week, that THC is going to stay in your system. Okay. As an expert professional, that THC is going to stay in your system up to 45 to 60 days. So there's, like you were saying before, you can't tell how inebriated someone is with marijuana, because just because I have, I meet the 0.23 or the 23 nanograms that the DOT requires, or the 20 nanograms that the military is looking for. I meet that threshold. In no way 40 days later am I still high. Because if so, I want some of that weed and I want it right now. But
Exactly.
people,
They don't have the technology to be able to determine how people are currently being affected by the THC that's in their system. And we know scientifically that the THC high can be gone in a matter of hours, depending on how much you
yeah,
take. You could even
yeah,
never truly get to an inebriated state or to an under the influence state having a couple of hits. You could just get pain easement. There's all kinds of weed out there that's low THC. Just because you have
absolutely.
THC doesn't mean that all THC is consumed or used or affects across the board either. With heroin, with cocaine, with meth, like what its intended purpose is. So when you test for it,
Yeah,
you know what the intent was. With THC
yeah.
consumption, that's not it. It's not the same.
Exactly. And the thing is, if we want to go with the medical, if we want to go with the medical argument, we have to treat it medically. And what I mean is, okay, I've got a guy, he has a family or he doesn't have a family, but he needs to support himself and his people. So he's a construction person, he's a carpenter by trade. He has chronic back pain from literally decades of doing the thing that he knows how to do. He has several
Mm-hmm.
different options. He can take nothing, which is woo, yeah. Ugh, he can take nothing. That's sketchy, because he's still gonna be in pain. He's not gonna freaking get any benefit out of it. He's still got to go to work. He can take pills, or he can take pharmaceuticals, which, not here bad pharmaceuticals, but they're not going to fix anything. They're just going to mask the effects. Weed is going to do the same thing. It's going to mask the effects, but your organs aren't going to degrade and be any less useful in 10 years.
You're
So,
not going to pick up a new addiction either.
exactly. So
and
just based
and
on
chronic pain.
just
Sorry, you
based
froze for a
on
second.
logic, just based on logic, logic would tell me to take the weed because it's going to, while it's still only going to mask the effects, it's not going to fix anything. It's going to do it with the least amount of side effects and the least danger to my body and my organs, and to preserve your quality of life. That's the thing. You could take, and that's the thing. People with chronic pain, people without chronic pain don't understand that it's a totally different organism when you wake up and before your feet hit the ground, you've got to figure out, what am I going to do with this pain that I've got going on today? Because I can't do anything else till I figure out what I'm going to do with this pain.
People do
Now,
not understand with chronic illness like that, with chronic pain, it affects your mental health as well. So not only are
yes,
you deteriorating in a physical sense, you can't function normally in a physical sense, you're not able to function with your brain correctly. And stuff like jobs like customer service, you don't need to
oh,
necessarily use your body. You can use your brain and your mouth. And if you're letting, mental health decline, then you're getting affected two different ways, which is
yeah, and
not
it,
productive to have an employee.
yeah, it's you know what I'm saying, and it's like, and I want to give a shout out to all the employers there. We're not bashing you, because I'll tell you right now, the reason most employers don't want you to smoke marijuana, they could actually care less as long as you could do your work. The problem is they have to have certain insurances, and they have to meet, so some of them have to meet certain security requirements, and they're not going to let them pass that with you smoking weed. Most automotive places, if you're driving a vehicle, if you're driving somebody else's vehicle, they're not going to let you smoke weed. It's not because they hate weed and they're trying to keep you from getting better. It's because their insurance absolutely is not going to cover them if they know that you're smoking weed, driving other people's cars around the parking lot. It's just not great. Um, so,
Yeah, federal
business owners,
regulation.
yeah, business owners, we're not trying to bash on you, but we are saying that it's a difficult situation to be in, where you have someone that you know can do the job. You have absolutely know they can do the job, but they tested positive for quote unquote drugs. Now your insurance company says, hey, we're not going to continue to cover you unless you fire that guy, because he's a liability. He has the highest likelihood to freaking do something messed up. But forget about that dude that shows up drunk, or who has 10 DUIs. He's totally fine. We like him. He's awesome. it's it,
And
it,
that's
it,
what's
it's
crazy. Business owners have to face not only their a scarcity of skilled employees, certain requirements from insurance. Now legalization, employees are finally starting to fight back for termination based only on THC, and that's kind of what I went into with common sense. Like if you and and then on a side note, I think that there are jobs where people don't like you and they use drug testing as a way to get rid of you with no consequences. They absolutely do use that drug testing specifically to get rid of people that they don't like, or people that maybe they do have a bias against, a way to skirt the law, so to speak. And what we need to
yeah,
do is change the law. But what's interesting is that businesses are being taken to court, and the courts are siding with the employees, saying based on a drug test only, you're firing people. And now it's more acceptable for people to stand up for themselves and say, hey, I was medicating, hey, I never had a poor job performance. It's a way for people to
yeah,
fight back against that loophole. And it's if we change our HR practices to look at performance, and base write-ups on performance, not base write-ups on something that is a technical loophole for you to oust somebody, then
yeah,
workers will have a better chance of not only choosing their own medical choices for their bodies and what's best for them. We're also looking at a pro employee workplace workplace where you're not going to have those, people who skate by on the coats of other people. And we're not going to have to look at that interpersonal politics. Like, you're going to have to look at yourself and be the best employee that you can be because your job depends on it. Not, oh crap, I got to make sure that nobody knows that I smoke, even though I have chronic pain.
Yes.
Nobody can know. Otherwise, oh, there goes my livelihood.
Well, it's like, hey, you go to lunch, you're all stooped over. Oh, and then you come back smelling like Febreze, and you're like, "Hey guys, I'm totally fine." And that's what's so crazy. As an employer, I would much rather have a person who is late 10 minutes to work every fucking day, just later than shit. No matter what I do, I can't get them to work. But I would rather have that person that's late every day, but gets their work done and doesn't have to have their hand held. I'd rather have them there than a person that shows up on time and don't do shit, because it's all about the
Or they do
efficiency.
work, but exactly. If you have a more efficient employee who runs later in the day, I mean, people are starting to throw out the standardized work week anyway. People are starting to be more efficient by working from home because businesses aren't having to have the overhead of having a workplace for employees to go to. I mean, we're already moving away from that stereotypical like 9 to 5 because we've discovered through science that people are not always productive at the same times of the day.
Yeah.
Some people are later in the day, some people function great in the morning. And it's, giving somebody a workload and expecting them to do the work. And then if they can't perform that work, then you don't need them, which is a very like cut and dry way to figure out good employees. I mean, you know,
Well,
and that it's
I
interesting
get your.
because the
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's interesting that a lot of the data that is on people who smoke THC or people who have THC in their system as employees is very much focused on like, do they have the most accidents? Do they have the most, like workplace issues? Are they late? Do they not show up? There's actual data that people have done to follow employees and see, based on whether they have THC in their drug test or not, whether they pop dirty or not, what trends are setting with them. But we all know that statistics can be skewed because where are they getting
Yeah.
this data from? It's very specifically only for people who have tested positive for THC. That's the only
Yeah.
group that they're studying. And so, they're not really looking at external factors just because they have weed. Did they also have alcohol? Did they also have some other kind of drug that was in their system? These numbers are just for if THC was present in a drug test. And they're saying that the accidents are higher, the rate of showing up to work is, slim to none based on other,
Yeah.
undirty people. And they're also saying
Yeah.
that, they're more likely to have a workplace injury. They're not looking at any other factors other than THC was present during the test. They don't tell
And
you
here's
what else was, what the lifestyle
Yeah.
was, all the other factors that go into saying, yes, this type of person or this group of people who fall in these parameters are more likely to be these things. It's
And see, that's
just
the thing.
THC that's triggering that.
Here's what's crazy is, and someone told me this, and it fucking blew my mind totally out of this world. And what they said was, the people that are smoking THC are getting fired because the smart people that smoke THC nobody knows about. And what that means is, there's a portion of data that you will never get. It will never be exposed to the public because of the stigma that comes along with smoking marijuana. There's probably people out there right now that are performing high level jobs and just, they're probably smoking couple fatties a day, and they're turning out awesome shit. Nobody's
That's just
ever
like
gonna know.
you should never learn criminal tips from people in jail because they're the ones that got caught. There are criminals out
Absolutely.
there who have never been caught for their crimes. We're never going to get
Absolutely.
any data on those people because they beat the system. Like, bravo, they have the best luck
Absolutely.
in the world. Something. People who smoke
Absolutely.
THC, yeah.
And it's like, I love when, personally, as a person that knows that the court system is jacked up, I love when they interview criminals in jail and they ask them stuff like, "Oh, what do you think about leading a life of crime?" And they're like, "It sucks. I would never lead a life of crime. I would go the straight and narrow." Of course, because you're an idiot and you got caught. So crime doesn't pay for you. There are other people out there that are unfortunately better criminals and they are living their best life right now. But you will
Yep.
never know who they are because if they tell you, they'll have to kill you. So, and
Right?
that's I think I just like marijuana. There's me. I'm a mechanic by trade, and it's one of those jobs that's kind of on the edge. You're operating heavy machinery and stuff, and so by and large, whoever you work for would like it if you weren't high or drunk when you come into work because you have a tendency to damage less shit. But it's easy to tell if you're still drunk, but it's not so easy to tell if you're still high. And that's where, that freaking discrepancy come in is because I can go out, I can slam 20 beers at lunch. When I go to work the next day, if they say there's a drug test tomorrow, by that time, all 20 of those beers will be out of my system. If I freaking smoke a half ounce of weed today, there's no way in hell that's going to be out of my system by tomorrow. I'm going to be stressing out when they tell me, "Hey, random drug test." I'm going to be like, "Oh no, I feel sick. I think I got to go to the hospital." So yeah. And it's one of
It's
those things
interesting.
where,
It's
go ahead.
interesting that you talk about the courts because right now there are courts siding with people who have smoked THC and have lost their jobs. In Nevada, they've actually banned pre-employee drug screening to eliminate applicants from applying
Yes.
for a job. There's also New York City has banned drug testing for as a reason to have employment.
Well, a lot, and one of the major changes that I've seen is a lot of Amazon delivery subcontractor companies are waiving the requirement for drug testing as for people to drive their vehicles. And to me, that is huge. As a mechanic being in the transportation industry, I know that one thing that will drive up your insurance or your coverage or and drive down the amount of places that you can work is the type of drug usage. So, the fact that they are opening up that realm of driving a vehicle to freaking people that are actually smoking weed is or and not just smoking but eating edibles, using topicals and everything else, because there's a lot of people out there that are new to weed. And when I was new to weed, I thought that what I want to do is I want to be honest and I want to tell people that I'm using weed. Absolutely not. That is the quickest way to get fired and wind up with no employment. So they don't want to lie to you, but you're making them kind of. So,
Right? I think it's crazy. And the only real data that we have is so recent that it's not like it's a lifelong study. But I
yeah.
read an article where an attorney that represented like something like 4,000 businesses in the state of Colorado said that the impact that was prophesied that was going to happen has not even met the level of impact that they were anticipating. And attorneys are realists. Like, for an attorney to say that, what was expected, it doesn't even meet what was expected, that's got to be a pretty decent impact that's happening in Colorado. And
Well,
they are one of the few states, I think, that you can really like judge across a good cross section of America, because I feel like California, yeah, they're legal. Oregon, yeah, they're legal. they have a very like West Coast point of view. And I feel like the more middle states that you
Yeah,
get, you start to get like a full, like clear picture. Like I don't think really one voice drowns out the other. Some states, I'm
yeah,
sure, but like for the most part, Colorado is pretty open-minded, and then they do have like
yeah,
conservative pockets, and they have their own state laws. I mean, that's a
yeah,
pretty interesting assessment, is that businesses who are going through it are like, it's like alcohol. It's the same
yeah,
thing. People can come into work drunk, people can come into work high, and it hasn't, escalated from what they're used to seeing. So it's not like you're getting alcoholics and stoners that are coming into work
yeah,
and screwing things up. They're
yeah.
not seeing much of a change, and all those people are still existing the same.
Well, and I want to make one thing abundantly clear. There's people out there listening. They're probably in the comments right now. They're like Slizwhack. I see your little wacky name over there. They're like, oh, now that weed is legal, a bunch more people are gonna start smoking weed because now you're getting all the kids addicted. Shut it. First off, it's like bringing sand to the beach. Just because they made it legal, it doesn't mean that a bunch of people started doing it. It's just now the people that were already doing it, now you know about them. That's it. There's
Yep.
no, and it's kind of like even the experts say that have polled high schoolers and kids, they say that, illicit or use of marijuana without their parents' knowledge for whatever reason has gone way down. And I don't know about any scientific reasons, but I think it's because kids are still kids. And because it's accepted and people are starting to know more about it, kids are like, meh, I'm good. It's like, oh, you like that thing, parents? No, I'm good. You guys screwed it up. And I think that's what's happening because there's not as many people out there that are high schoolers, according to the experts, that are out there freaking taking marijuana as a gateway drug. Whatever they're doing it. They're not using marijuana to take Xannies. If they want to take Xannies, they're taking Xannies. That's what they're doing. They're not like, hey, we got to freaking first we get our baby steps in, and then we go up to this stuff, then we graduate to no, they're fucking ridiculous kids. Their brains hadn't even fully developed. They're jumping right to the end.
Well, and I think a lot
But
of the generation now that is raising kids was part of the generation where marijuana started to be acceptable as like a thing to do. You weren't
yeah,
hardcore stigmatized or kicked out of the town. Nobody went around blabbing that that's what you did. There were a lot of
yeah,
people in that generation who were growing up without that stigmatism, or stigma against stigmatism,
well,
the stigma against marijuana, against cannabis use. And so now these parents are finally seeing legalization. So that's part of their life. And if they're teaching their kids the ins and outs and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, like parents who drink should, they should be teaching their kids about what's out there, what to expect. Not all kids who grew up with party parents ended up drinking or becoming the party kid. Not all
and I
parents who not all kids who grew up with parents who use cannabis are going to use cannabis, especially
yeah.
depending on what side of the fence you fall on. Is it just a recreational thing? Is it a medical thing? That's going to affect the next generation of cannabis users.
Now, me, I gotta play devil's advocate here, and I'm not saying because having been a kid, I know that automatically, and it makes absolutely no sense. No matter how fun some shit is, no matter how awesome it is, as soon as my parents start liking it, burp. And I think that's what I can't be rebellious doing something that you guys approve of. I have to do something else that's to show my individuality. You know what I'm saying? And I think on a good note, cannabis is getting to that level where there's enough knowledge about it to where people that are doing it aren't looked as outsiders. I think It's getting more because there's legalization out the ass, but that brings us more closer to that normalization aspect, and we're doing that in the next generation, not only of weed smokers but the next generation of people, as they see and are exposed more and more to cannabis. Because you got to think, if I told you that freaking high potency painkillers would be a thing, if I told you that 20 years ago, you would have laughed. If I was like, yeah, you can buy like oxycodones at any high school on any corner, people would be like, nah, you won't be able to do that. Absolutely, they're doing it. And I personally think that if there would have been more information out about how that's not good for you, about how it's, it's a good thing that when abused has very dire consequences. And I think marijuana is the same way. It's a good thing, but when you abuse it, there's going to be consequences, just like anything else. It's not, I want to stress that it's not a cure all, it's not a magic bullet, it's going to cure anything you have. But used properly, it has been known to help people that have some chronic issues. It's, yeah, it is what it is. There's people out there that are allergic to weed. You know what I'm saying? I sure hate it for them, but there's people out there that are like that. There's people who have bad effects from THC. It
There's
still
some
can go
people that
bad.
THC doesn't affect because their metabolism or the way that they metabolize it is messed up in their body. There's
Yeah,
some
and
people
it's
who can use it but can't really use it.
exactly, and it's so weird that, at the end of the day, it's just another tool in a person that's looking for something that's less dangerous to themselves. It's another tool in their toolbox to on their way to make themselves and their body better and last longer. That's all it is. It's not going to is marijuana going to magically make you happier? No. It's probably going to make you not worry about some shit, but it's not going to magically make you happier. It's still, it's not a cure all. You know what I'm saying? It's just like if I have a cramp and I slap some Tiger Balm on it, yeah, the Tiger Balm's going to work for a while, but I got to eat some bananas in the meantime. I got to drink a little water. Or because if I don't, as soon as I go to exercise again, that same cramp is going to come back unless I attend to the underlying problem. But I can mask that for a while with little to no side effects. And that's the key issue. Little to no side effects. Is marijuana better than
I think
pills?
that when it comes
Go ahead.
I would see, and that's where the common sense comes back into play, right? There's no one size fits all when it comes to cannabis use. There's no one size fits all when it comes to what laws should regulate THC use and having a job, being a job applicant. There's no one size that fits all. For example, I think that mass transit drivers should we need to get better at our testing if we're going to require drug testing, and there are industries where it's not safe to be under the influence and use
Yes.
and complete the job. But that already exists. That already exists where people can drive impaired on alcohol. People can drive on impaired on other narcotics. People can drive
Okay.
impaired on Ambien. There's a lot
Yeah.
of that people
Yeah.
can still use and abuse while doing these jobs. And I can see where it should be a case by case basis. I just think that the approach needs to be a common sense thing where, hey, you shouldn't be impaired during this job. There should be tighter restrictions, where they can screen out, chronic users or whatever.
Absolutely.
We have to have advancements and we have to have reform at the same time.
Absolutely. Because and I can't, because here in Oregon they have a thing called driving under it's called, they have DUI, which is like drunk driving, driving under the
Mm.
influence. Then they also have DUII, which is driving under the influence of intoxicants. Now, that can be anything. You can be huffing fucking air duster. Burp. You can be
Mm-hmm.
smoking some weed. And what a lot of people don't understand is that's one of the first steps to normalizing and freaking getting a handle on how to test people for impairment. Because
Mm.
driving under influence, if you're under the influence of something, you have to be impaired. It's influencing what you do and how you perform, whether it be slowing your reaction time or whatever. But I still have that same weed in my system 2 weeks later. I'm not impaired. The weed is still in my system, but I'm definitely not impaired. And that's one of those things where a lot of people say, well, Oregon shouldn't have the DUI law. But because they do, is it's forcing the government and its infrastructure to proceed further into that. How do we tell if someone's impaired? Because there's no way on earth that a person has a high blood alcohol level and is not impaired. That's just the way it
And
is.
see,
If 50%, go ahead.
we've got stuff now that will impair you to where you can't do your service job, etc. We already have laws in place to identify and deal with those situations. So what I would like to see is THC just included underneath the umbrella that's already in existence. DUIs are already a thing. DUIs are a great addition to how we already regulate situations like we're worried about THC being in part of. We're worried about drivers who are on the road who are under the influence. And, just like alcohol tolerances, THC tolerance is also different for everyone.
Yes.
So, you know what I mean? Like we already have a situation where it's apples to apples comparison. We need to take THC and just move it into the mainstream where all that stuff already exists for situations that we're concerned with, specifically with THC.
And see, that's one of the great things about DUII. It goes specifically by impairment.
Mm,
So even if they test you and you have marijuana in your system, that doesn't mean you're going to get a DUII. They give you a test similar to a freaking like a regular DUI, make it see if you're freaking hold your head straight, performing a couple different physical things. Now, if you pass those things, if you have weed in your system, you're going to be free to go.
yes. You could
Now,
smell
and that's
like weed.
you
You could have
exactly.
weed
You can smell
paraphernalia
like
on
weed.
you.
You can smell like and a lot of people do that. There's could be three people in the car just because the car smells like weed. Here in the great state of Oregon, they have determined that that is not probable cause. So just because your car smells like weed doesn't necessarily mean they get a free pass to search your shit. And
That's
that's
awesome.
a lot of people say, well, they shouldn't be worried about whether my car smells like weed or not. And the problem is, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want them to do research on something, it has to start somewhere. And luckily for this great state of Oregon, it started and then it's been challenged in court because the way that they're doing it now is not how they started out to do it. It's been challenged in court
Mm,
and they've come together. The state and the people have come together to determine that, hey, we're going to have to find a better way to do this that everybody can agree on, especially people that know about science. So that's where we're at. And that's one of the reasons why, if you're just impaired, then you're going to have a problem. But if you smoked weed 2 weeks ago and you smell like weed, it's going to be all good. Shout out to you, Oregon.
it's the first time that you can use the excuse, that's not mine, where it's going to apply. And you can
Exactly.
travel just like you would with alcohol containers that are closed, not intending for consumption. You can have
Yes.
unused an unused pipe, a filled pipe that's not currently being used. I mean, there has to be
Yes.
evidence of use, just like there does have to be with alcohol. That's fantastic. And that's a common
And
sense approach. Do they
it is.
seem impaired? No. All right. Hey, man, you were speeding. It's freaking great.
And the thing is, people don't realize that we're at this point, but we didn't start at this point. There was some OGs that had to get pulled over and say, "Hey, you smell like weed. I'm taking you to jail." They said, "Hey, that's not right. I'm gonna sue you." And they did, and they said, "I see what you're saying there. Let's change that." And that's how we got to where we are today. But when people start doing it, they've got to be willing to accept that little bit of growing pains to get where they're going to be. Because of course, the bad part of any legal or any system is humans, really. The part that fails is the human part. And I think, based on what Oregon's done in about the last 5 years or so, is they started out where, if in the beginning, when they had DUII, if you smelled like weed, if an officer smelled weed in your car, they were saying that it's a safe assumption that because you inhaled some of that THC, you're high. But then they came out with science and said, you know what? That's not necessarily true. It's one of those things where
That's
painful to
crazy,
get where
man.
we're at. Like I'm going through one of the same things with my puppies. My puppy is peeing everywhere on the floor, shitting all over the place. It's ridiculous. But I got to go through that to get them to
Oh
learn where to go to the bathroom. Because let me tell you, there's nothing
no.
worse than
True.
stepping on squishy stuff in the late night. It's irritating. But
Oh.
you got to go through that to
Oh.
get to where, you know, and I'm not special. Everybody that's had a puppy has had to do it. That's one of those things. But
Yep.
in conclusion, what is your thought on weed in the workplace? I know you say common sense, but what is your, if Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was right here and he said, "Hey, what do you think about weed? How can we make it? How can we make it to where people aren't getting fired for weed?" What would you tell them?
I think that we're already on the way there. We're already making leaps and bounds, and like I said, common sense approach, man.
It is.
There's no one answer across all of the industries that makes sense, because like we said, we'd be fine if the dude that's changing your oil is a little bit buzzed or whatever, or has medicated and has THC in his system at the time of service, because
Yeah.
that's not brain surgery. A brain surgeon,
Yeah.
absolutely not. You better be sober as all get out. You had better have, all your shit straight and cognizant
Yeah.
AF. I don't want
I don't
none of
want
that around my brain.
I don't want any of those leftover sponges in my cranium. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yeah. If
and,
he's taking
and
CBD for something, totally fine with that. It's
yeah,
safe
because it's not
specifically
intoxicating. It's not
Canada
inebriating.
with, but exactly, exactly. It's not the medication itself, it's the dose that I have a concern with.
Yeah, yeah. That's because yeah, yeah. I
And that's
feel you
just
on that.
it. We need advancements on the drug testing to be able to do something like that, where if the brain surgeon who medicates and made a mistake, they can test him, or if there's a complaint against him, test him and determine if he has enough THC to be a problem at that
Yeah.
time, or if it is a continued abuse of that medication. Absolutely, there should be a test to determine that, because people are still, like I said, under the same umbrella. People are doing that already with alcohol and other drugs, other
Oh
narcotics.
yeah.
Just because they test positive for THC doesn't mean that the reason that they were popping dirty, or that's the reason that, or that's what they were using at the time. There's a lot of things that are already in place that say, if this situation happens, we're going to do it this way. So they would probably test the doctor if there was a concern about malpractice due to him being under
Yes.
the influence. There should be a way to determine that with THC, just like there is for all the other things that could be going wrong or he could be under the influence of. We
Well,
need
I,
to
I
invest
think
that time and energy.
I think we're on the right road. Like you were saying before, I think we're on the right road. It's going to be a long road. It's going to be some growing pains. Unfortunately, it's going to be some people that have to go to jail unrighteously. They're going to get out. They're going to be okay. But there's going to be some people have to go to jail and
It's
sue
happening
the
still,
person.
yeah. Right?
And I think it's part of the growing pains. But what I can say though is we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all the people who blazed the trail before us. All those dudes settling lids back in the 60s. I salute you, Mr. Selling a lid on the Afghan in his crocheted pants. I salute you. Got to pave the way. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, once again, this has been Slizwack and Rochel T for Go Here Smoke This. We've lived, we've learned, we've talked about weed in the workplace. If you have a comment about weed in the workplace, don't forget to leave it below and lean in. If you like this content, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Again, this has been Slizwack and Rochel T, and you should grow.